What's going on, everybody? It's Q from Retro Q Gaming, and woo lad, have we got a packed week for today, because we are back with episode 21 of our lovely little Quack experimental podcast. Lots of stuff to talk about, heart racing, adrenaline pumping, all that good stuff is going on. Oh Q, why is that happening? You're talking about stuff in a video. Out this morning for a nice couple of hours bike ride. Someone I know ran into as well, and probably going to get kicked out of my Pokemon group for this one actually. But yeah, he finally pushed me over the edge by literally pushing me. So I just slapped him a headbutt with my helmet still on, and yeah, he went down into tears and blood. That was fun. I got a little bit of a bruise, whatever way the inside of my helmet just pressed against my face when I hit him. Yeah, he won't be doing that again, but I'm probably going to get kicked out of my Pokemon group for him. He's in there, so take that, you fat sack of English shit. Anyway, moving along. We have our first topic we want to talk about here, the Mega SG. You might remember the Mega SG. Analog, the company that makes, say, the NES, the SNES, and the Mega Drive with their FPGA systems. Well, they have the Mega Drive system, the Mega SG, and it works with almost every add-on there is for it. Now, because of that, many people have been clamoring for pretty much the one add-on, or the one or two specific one. Well, you'll see what I mean in a minute, but the one main add-on that everyone wanted that didn't work on there, but they obviously wanted it to work on there. Now, this previously didn't work, like I said, because it is the Sega 32X, and the reason why the Sega 32X didn't work with the analog Mega SG is because the way the 32X transmits the data back and forth between the original Mega Drive, it's actually kind of a dual analog cable. Now, obviously, the FPGA Mega SG is completely digital, but yeah, that was a problem. However, because of all of that, with the new, thanks to at least, and with the new prototype DAC, it's a digital to analog converter, that analog, the company Analog, are beta testing and sending out a couple of test units and review units to YouTubers and reviewers and all that. Well, thanks to what's afforded by that, because it does convert it to an analog signal and work from there, the 32X now works. You do require a very specific custom analog cable, analog produced cable. It's a two-way custom mixing cable, so that works in that regard. Now, there's positives and negatives to this. I'll get to that now in a minute. So that's pretty cool. It's now possible to use the 32X on the Mega SG. That, in general and in essence, the fact that they got it working, the main point of all of this is great within itself. And the reason, by the way, if you're not sure what the point of the digital to analog converter is, it's so you can use the Mega SG, or I suppose technically probably the Super NT and all as well. You can use those because they're only HDMI out, plug it into this converter, and it will change it to an analog signal, and it has analog outputs. So you can use it on like a CRT TV or a PVM or something like that. Now, the cool thing about it too is because of that, you can also use light guns, which were previously unusable on the regular versions of them because of FPGA not because it's FPGA, but because those FPGA based systems only had HDMI digital out, it could only go to modern flat panel TVs and monitors and stuff, which we all know light guns don't work on those because of how they refresh and all that. So that's cool in a sense that it works with the older TVs, the PVMs and light guns and all too. Now, they've confirmed that Doom and Smoke Monster Afterlife RPG are both tested and working for the 32X. So support is definitely coming. It's probably not going to be around for a while. All the stuff has to be custom done on a game per game basis. Then there's bugs and troubleshooting and redoing it, blah blah blah, yada yada yada. Now, the big problem with this is in order to use the 32X, you do have to go down to an analog signal. So you're going down to an analog signal. So unless you're planning on playing it for an authentic experience, being a CRT, or you want to play it on a PVM or something like that, you have to wonder if that you can go from the Mega SG through the DAC. Now, this is obviously assuming you're using the 32X. You're going from the Mega SG through the DAC, and then maybe to an OSSC or a FrameMeister to get that back. But at that point, what's the point? You see, I mean, hopefully, first off, that wouldn't mess up the signal in some way. I don't know if it would because of how the 32X works and all that. But Here's the big problem. I've spoken to several people about this in the meantime, and they've always said, okay, the fact that you have to use the DAC and it brings it down to an analog signal and whatnot, I would rather just use one of my other systems for it, because there's the not the 32X, what's the other one? The CDX. You could just use that. It's native and it's analog. You see what I mean? It begs the question. Now, will I pick up a DAC? I don't know. Possibly, because there is the idea that I would love to do it. I would love to eventually have a PVM. I might make it my big #1 purchase next year when I go back into retro collecting, and that could be my big splurge, my big opener again. But obviously I would love a DAC in that case, because that way I don't have to just go from, sure, I could go from the original consoles and the original hardware, but not all of them are RGB modded, not all of them have the capability without the mods for the cables, blah blah blah. So in essence, I could just go with the SNES or the Super NT and get the DAC and just go into the PVM that way. Same with the Mega SG, blah blah. See, and at least if I get the DAC, that one would work on both. So I'll have to see how it goes. But the fact is that they have the 32X working in some capacity. The whole other side of it with the signal, the DAC going down and possibly back up or whatever, being pointless, that's irrelevant for what I'm talking about here. The fact is that they got the Mega SG working with the 32X through a custom mixing cable and the DAC. That's the important thing to take away, because there is progress. There is progress, and that is what I'm happy about. And on top of all of that, of course, we have Gamescom. Many big announcements coming out of Gamescom. Some I don't really feel the need to talk about. They're just more, oh, hey, look, here's new stuff for this new game. Here's new stuff for a new game, or more stuff for an existing game, or whatever it is. So not all of it's going to talk about, but there is some big important Gamescom news that I do want to mention in here. One of them is a big Sony announcement in some regards, because Sony, despite, well, you see, Sony have bought Insomniac Games. Now, they're becoming part of Sony Worldwide Studios. You may remember Insomniac Games. They made Spyro 1, 2, and 3 back in the day, Ratchet and Clank, they made the Resistance trilogy, Sunset Overdrive, Spider-Man on PS4, and perhaps, of course, most importantly, a game that I was just thinking about a few days ago, if not last week. Well, it would have been last week, because by the time this happened, it would have been last week. But Disruptor on PS1, first-person shooter, made by Insomniac. I didn't actually know it was made by Insomniac until very, very recently, just a few days ago after I was writing down notes for this announcement. But it turns out Disruptor, a very early PS1 first-person shooter, which is Insomniac's first game, believe it or not. Yeah, I was thinking about that, and yeah, I may have to pick up a copy of that at one point. But anyway, Disruptor on PS1, check it out. Very kind of campy and low budget, but strangely satisfying. Anyway, back to the point. But the whole thing is that now that Insomniac Games and whatnot are part of Sony Worldwide Studios, it's especially funny to me because just recently, Ted Price, the CEO of Insomniac Games, literally went out and said, we don't want to be bought. We love our independence. And then a few weeks later, they get bought and basically lose the independence, if you will. Some people would say, oh, they can just still work the same. It doesn't work that way. When you have someone above you, you still have to listen to them. When you have no one above you, you don't have to listen to them. But that's the great part of it anyway. This doesn't bother me in the sense that, oh yeah, you know, they're part of Sony now, that's great. It doesn't bother me in that regards. I don't like the majority of Insomniac games. I don't think they're bad for the most part. They just don't appeal to me. I can tell the difference between something being bad and something not appealing to me. But yeah, so the majority of their games don't really appeal to me. So it's not really that way. However, I will say this in one sense. I am never happy. This applies when Microsoft bought a bunch of studios last year, or was it the year before as well? I think it was both of them. No, it was earlier this year as well as last year. That was it. But I never like any studio being bought by a first party. I never like any third party studio being bought by a first party console or hardware manufacturer. There is one exception to this rule, which applies to everyone out there. If a studio is literally about to go bankrupt, go under, shutter their doors, and no longer exist, without a buyout, without purchase from one of these, or an acquisition from one of these companies, I will support it if it's a decent company. If it's Telltale or someone like that, they can fuck off, hopefully get run into the ground and never get jobs again. But that's for the executives, the people who actually ran it in, not the programmers and coders and whatnot. But yeah, I never like seeing a healthy, profitable, we'll call it quality, respectable studio just being bought just for the sake of it, because it takes away from everyone's potential, everyone's out there, everyone's enjoyment and all that too. And of course, when you look at Microsoft's track record, I know this is Sony, but when you look at Microsoft's track record, they have ran a couple of studios into the ground after purchasing them. There is the potential for other companies to do that too, and those studios would be limited. For example, Insomniac Games, they don't have the choice to release other stuff. They don't have the choice to release on other platforms. They don't have the choice that if someone goes under or runs into the ground, that they just ignore that platform. So I know all the Sony fanboys are out there blowing their own horns, blowing each other's horns by the sounds of it actually, when it comes to this, because, oh, my Spider-Man, my Spider-Man. But we'll see how it goes. Who knows, maybe we'll eventually get a Resistance remaster. Although, having said that, I did try to play Resistance a little bit ago. I think it was last year I tried to play it. Resistance 1 has aged extremely poorly. It's extremely difficult to play. Resistance 2 was just overall a bad game in general. I hated that one completely. Resistance 3 was great though, so maybe we'll see a remaster, and possibly all three games being updated to be a little bit more playable, or at least Resistance 1 be a little bit more playable. I don't think they can salvage 2, and 3 is a decent enough game as it is. But sticking with some interesting Sony news that the fanboys are trying to downplay, instead of completely upplaying the other one. Well, Mr. Super Punchable Face and terrible presenter Sean Layden, you probably have seen him presenting all sorts of Sony things that were terrible. One that springs to mind, well, I shouldn't say that Sony presentations were terrible, but his presence and his presentation were terrible. One that springs to mind was when they were, I believe it was the first time they unveiled and revealed Uncharted 4, when he just did his man that needs no introduction, and the way he did it was just so poorly. It was absolutely awful. Anyway, he had an interview with Bloomberg, and he talked about going forward with the PlayStation brand, with their first party studios, and what all there too. Now, he said, and I quote, these are direct quotes here, so Sony fanboys, you can just go jump off a bridge with your Spider-Man. But anyway, we must support the PlayStation platform. That is non-negotiable. That said, you will see in the future some titles coming out of my collection of studios which may need to lean into a wider installed base. Now, a wider installed base, what does that mean? Well, let's look at the whole situation. We have the PlayStation 4, which has not yet confirmed to have sold over 100 million units. They have shipped over 100 million units, but they have not confirmed sales of over 100 million units. That's the key thing, fanboys. You won't find that in fanboy videos. You'll just go 100 million shipped, 100 million shipped. I mean, technically, Microsoft could ship 100 million units. It doesn't mean they would sell 100 million units. You see my point here? Anyway, back to the point. So we have Sony with just under 100 million units sold. I believe it's about 98 or so. You have Microsoft, which is probably in around the 35, 38, maybe 40 million mark. Somewhere between 35 to 40. Basically dead in the water. And we have the Switch, which is in the 30s, I believe. It's about 32, I think, was the last revealed number. But the big thing here is there's also one other important thing to mention. That is the PlayStation. That is the PC, which has millions and millions and hundreds of millions, if not in the billions, of a wide installed base. So there's a big key thing here, of course. So naturally, what could this mean? Well, it makes most sense that, given what we've seen very, very recently in the past, that some, obviously not all, but potentially some of Sony's first-party games could be coming to PC. Now, they could come later. They could come day and date. They could be old ones that get remastered or whatever it is. But let's look back on what we have on this here. The biggest and best platform, PC, where games aren't designed for ancient hardware like they are with consoles. Now, we'll likely never see something like The Last of Us or Uncharted or God of War or something coming to PC. But how many other games, studios and IPs would we see come over? Sony has a vast wealth of all of this. Look at Insomniac, actually, since they just bought Insomniac. Look at some of their older games. Spyro is already remastered and coming to everything. Now, I know Spyro is a bad example, but I'm just going to use it because they did create the original tree. So, Spyro is coming to everything. It's coming to PC and Switch next month. It's already on Xbox and PlayStation. So you see the point here. They also have a lot of other smaller stuff as well. Insomniac have Resistance. Maybe they could remaster Resistance, put it on PS4, PS5 or PC or whatever it is. There's also other stuff that you could work out too. Killzone is basically a dead series at this point because Shadowfall was just so fucking bad. Can't even remember Killzone 3. I played a demo of it, but that was it. Killzone 2, well, that's infamous for how they fucked everyone over with their bull shots. Killzone 1 was fantastic, though. I loved Killzone 1. It was no Halo like they tried to make it, or no Halo Killer like they tried to make it be, but it was still a good game. But you see my point. Sony has plenty of non-top tier games from all their studios that are ripe for picking, porting, remastering, whatever it is. And my perfect example of all of this that I said I would give is Quantic Dream. Now, Quantic Dream were never technically an exclusive first-party studio. They were just contracted. They were an external studio contracted to make, hey, if it takes you 5 years to make one game, well, here, we'll give you a contract for 3 games. Or we'll give you a contract for this game. Then they start working on a second game and Sony come back and say, yep, we'll take that, we'll take that. Just like they're doing with Kojima and his Kojima Productions and Death Stranding, supposedly, because that was originally announced for PS4 and PC before it was announced as Death Stranding. But we'll see how it goes anyway. But when it comes to Quantic Dream, 2 of those games are already out on PC. I've played the demos of both of them. They do run very, very, very well. They are obviously definitive editions of the game. They're much better than anything you can get on the console variants of them. And they're still published by Sony. So Sony is still getting some money, still getting a cut of all of this. They could be working with the Epic Games money. They could be working with sales. They could be working with whatever it is. They're still getting these games out on other, wider, better installed bases and platforms. Bigger and better platforms. So they're still getting all of this. So even if, like I said, we don't get The Last of Us 2, The Last of Us 3, whatever it is, we don't get Uncharted, we don't get God of War, there's still so many other things that Sony could potentially bring over. Most of it doesn't appeal to me personally. Actually, well, let me think about that. I don't know if I should say most of it doesn't appeal to me personally, because when you look at the PS3 and the Xbox 360, pretty much all my PS3 library is exclusive games. Now, there are many, many Sony exclusive games from first and third party that I don't care for, but I'd have to go back and count before making a statement like that. Now, next up, we got some nice little news that I do want to talk about. We have some exclusivity news. Now this, hell, that's the theme this week. Exclusivity, between Sony losing some of it, Sony gaining some of it, and, well, at least 2 more stories involving exclusivity. Some of which are work in my favor, some of which I could twist to work in my favor, but I like to be objective even if it doesn't work out for me. So, let's go with the first one. Dark by Unfold Games. Now, Dark, D-A-R-Q, not D-A-R-K. No, I didn't develop it. But it's made by Unfold Games, which is actually just one guy, from what I understand. It's a solo indie dev who's making this game. Now, just recently, he announced that there would be a launch date for this game. Nice big fanfare, all this stuff. And many people were obviously very happy and looking forward to this. So when he announced the launch date for Steam, he was, overjoyed, and all the people could finally get to test this out and play this and whatnot. Now, specifically, 3 days after announcing the Steam date, Epic Games contacted him. You guys know where this is going, but you may or may not be right or wrong. Epic Games contacted him specifically after the release date for Steam was announced. Now, first off, that sounds extremely, extremely petty. It's almost as if, and in my mind, this is probably how it works, because you'll see why now in a second. It's almost as if they specifically waited for the Steam announcement just so they could undercut it and pull it off Steam and say, fuck you, Steam, we have it on Epic. It seems like they could do that just to fuck with people on purpose. Now, it will make more sense now in a moment. So, they reached out to him and they offered him an exclusivity deal. Or they talked about an exclusivity deal. Now, he did say this, that before numbers and money were discussed, that he declined because Epic made 1 or 2 specific, what do we call them, outlines or non-negotiable things. There's basically stipulations of the Epic deal and agreement. So there was apparently he declined all this before any numbers or money or anything was discussed. But they made it clear that, exact words, releasing Dark non-exclusively was not an option. So basically, what he asked them was if he could launch it on Steam as well as Epic, possibly GOG or something else as well. But because he specifically already had the Steam announcement out there, and all the people, he didn't want to break the promises to them, all the people who were looking forward to it on Steam, maybe had already pre-ordered it on Steam, whatever, he wanted to live up to that for himself as a person, because he has standards and he holds himself to these regards and his morals and principles and whatnot. And they said, no, it's absolutely, completely out of the question, blah, blah, blah. Now, they had already announced, or they had already told him and said that there was a guaranteed sales number involved in the exclusivity contract. There was no, from what we understand, he says that there was no details specifically on how many copies it was for, or how much monetary straight up value it would have been. None of that stuff. Now, even though because of all that, he, like I said, he wanted to release it on GOG as well as Steam. He also knew it would ruin his credibility in the future. Take notes, Ooblets. Take notes, Ooblets devs. That this would ruin his credibility in the future. Because as I said previously in a different episode, if Ooblets developers come out and try to make, I don't care about that whole situation, the lies that the people were making, the bullshit, all this stuff. I don't care about any of that stuff. The fact, well, I do, but not for the point I'm going to make here. The fact is, Ooblets developers, your credibility is fucked for life. That's it. You know, you don't have to care. You can say, fuck you, I made my game, got my money, got mine, I'm Audi 5000 G, love you 3000, but not anyone who didn't buy our game. The point is, you fucked yourselves. Congratulations, you played yourself. That's how it works, right? So it's also especially funny because this whole situation, dude of Unfold Games, I can't remember your name. I'm sorry, I don't have it in the notes here. Dude of Unfold Games, I salute you. I commend you. You stood up for your morals, for your principles about you yourself that you hold yourself to, and you did that over piles of money. You have no idea how much respect I have for you over that. It's probably completely irrelevant. You will probably never see this. You probably don't know who I am and never will. I probably won't even buy your game. Nothing against you or your game. I just don't even know anything about it. But I am a big person for sticking to my guns, for my principles, for my morals. I don't buy games from certain developers because of how they've treated people in the past. I don't allow companies to do certain things and treat me certain ways. I never buy products or games or services or anything from them ever again because of what they've done. So yes, I applaud you so much for that. You've no idea, in this industry full of fake, bitch-made people who just go for money, me and you, we're pretty much all the industry has left at this point. Anyway, it goes on to get even worse. Not for Dark Dude, but for Epic Games, it gets even worse. So remember, they wanted to pay him to exclusively to only release on Epic. So they clearly saw this and said, this is a game we want on Epic. So clearly they had already seen it. They already knew of it. They knew of the quality. They knew of something. They already wanted it on their platform. But yes, it gets worse anyway. So when he turned down that exclusivity deal, he said, no, I'm just going to go publish on Steam, on GOG, and hey, I'll even publish it non-exclusively on Epic. You don't have to pay me a ton of money, you don't have to guarantee me sales or anything like that, but it gets worse. They went full petty. They went Timmy Tencent petty. And they said no. Epic Games said no. And it gets even better. There was a statement about it by Timmy Boy himself. And they said no because we only release curated quality games on our store. So remember, despite them actively trying to get this game onto their store, to pay money, not just get it for free, but specifically pay money to get it onto their store, back when it was not only clearly good enough for them, but it was good enough to pay money for, to pay probably hundreds of thousands of dollars for, to get exclusively on their store. But no. Apparently, it's worth probably hundreds of thousands, but it's not worth free because it's everywhere else. This is why Epic Games are a fucking cancer for the industry. This is why Tim Sweeney is a fucking cancer for the industry. But again, no, Tim Sweeney is just a petty little cunt, and Epic Games continues to ruin their reputation and damage PC gaming. Fuck you, Epic. Fuck you, and the Fortnite mech you rode in on. But next up, we got some sweet Yakuza news straight out of Gamescom. I think this is especially funny because I had just started playing Yakuza Kiwami either that day or the day before. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was hilarious anyway. I think it was the day after I started playing Yakuza Kiwami. But Yakuza 3, 4, and 5 remasters have been announced as coming to the West. The remasters already existed and whatnot before, but now they're coming to the West, so that is pretty cool. However, at the moment, unfortunately, they are only on PS4 for the minute. There was an interview with the producer and director and whatnot, and he basically unofficially said that they're coming to PC. And if you read the thing about it and the interview and all, yeah, they're pretty much coming. We already know that they're coming. They'll just be coming later, so we will get the definitive, the literal best versions of the game, as always, just like Yakuza Kiwami, just like Yakuza Kiwami 2, just like Yakuza 0, just like Yakuza 6 will be later this year. And yes, of course, we will have Yakuza 3, 4, and 5 remastered in their best forms ever. Now, Yakuza 3 Remastered Ninja released that day on the PSN. Yakuza 4 is coming out on the 29th of October, and Yakuza 5 will be out in February of 2020. Upon release of Yakuza 5 Remastered in February of 2020, there will be a physical edition of what they're calling the Complete Yakuza Remastered Collection in 2020. So that's going to have this big whole collection. It's going to have this like special disc and all that stuff too. It is kind of weird in this regard because usually when they remaster games, they just update the visuals and the quality and the performance and all that stuff. There are a little bit of extra changes in here too that I don't really want to focus on too much in this part of the video, mainly because I just don't know much about them. I only heard little snippets and read one or two little things about them. But apparently they're re-releasing or re-including some previously cut content. So stuff that had been included in the Japanese versions of some of these games that was cut for the Western versions has been reintroduced and reintegrated into the game. However, in reverse, at the same time, some of the stuff that was in some of these games in the Japanese version, because of social justice in modern year and all that stuff, they've cut one or two things out. There's some quest about some cross-dressing dude chasing down some dude. I don't fully know the details, not going to go into it, but because of supposed insensitivity and all, that has been removed, which I think is kind of bullshit that stuff gets removed and cut from games in that regard, especially when it comes to something like that. I've already made it very, very clear. There's only pretty much one situation and one topic that I agree that should be censored completely, but everything else should be pretty much free reign. But yeah, we'll see how it goes anyway. We all know Yakuza 6 is coming to PC as it is. It's already been on the Sega investor call. Uses the same new upgraded Dragon engine that Yakuza Kiwami 2 uses. Obviously, that's running on PC as it is already. And yeah, it's going to be great to have the entire Yakuza series on PC. Like I said, I played Yakuza 0 a couple of months ago. I just started Yakuza Kiwami the other day. And I'm looking to get my way through it, and at the rate I play these games, probably by the time I finish Kiwami 2, Yakuza 3 will be out. So yeah, we'll see. I'm looking forward to it. More Kiryu and Majima, more goodness. Although I'm just a little side note here. I'm a little bit confused in that regard. Obviously Yakuza, and by proxy Yakuza Kiwami, is the first game, the start of the series. I started with Yakuza 0. Goro Majima that I know is the suit-wearing suave club owner. But Goro Majima, as he was originally, or Majima, whatever you want, Goro Majima, has already existed from his original inception, I guess. Has been the weird haircut, snake jacket, crazy lunatic motherfucker. I'm conflicted. I like Yakuza 0 Goro better than I like the rest of them. And I have a feeling that going forward in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6... Goro is going to be jacket, hair, insane Goro. I don't know how I feel about that. Tiny bit of a different segment next, because we're going to talk about film news and film related stuff. Not something I usually talk about. At least not stuff I analyze, because I think the whole film critic analysis thing is just so insufferable. But anyway, we have a couple of new announcements. Now, not only do we already know there's a new James Bond film in production, and it's probably, it's probably even finished by now and in post-production, but it finally has a title. It's no longer, what was it? They were just going with codename Bond 25 or something like that. It's now officially called No Time to Die. So we'll have to see if that's going to be Beast or how... although it just, I couldn't even finish that sentence because I just remembered that, you know, everything Daniel Craig is in. So yeah, that's not looking promising. Anyway, it does have a release date, April 3rd, 2020 in the UK, which probably also means Ireland, and April 8th in 2020 in the US. So it is out a little bit earlier over here. Kind of makes sense, I guess, when you think about it, considering how English James Bond is and all of that stuff. But also on top of that, we have a Matrix 4 announcement. So not only do we have the Matrix Reloaded, and the Matrix Revolutions, the latter of which we kind of pretend doesn't exist, but yeah, it's official. It's announced. It's happening. Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss are coming back as Neo and Trinity, respectively. So hopefully, I don't know how they're going to do it, considering, you know, Carrie-Anne Moss in the first trilogy. So I don't know how that one's going to work. Anyway, it's going to be written and directed by Lana Wachowski, which originally I had no idea who it was, but it turns out that it's one of the original directors. I won't go into detail, but yeah, it's one of them. So it's only one of them. It's not going to be both of them coming back. It's just the one. So we'll see how it goes. At least the person in charge and the person who's doing all of this has the experience with this trilogy, with this series, with these characters, with this setting, because they literally created it. They are the #1 person to be in charge of all of this, or they're one of the two most qualified people, because obviously there was two of them. They were one of the two most qualified people to be in charge of all of this. Production is going to begin in 2020, so chances are we probably won't see it till like 2022, 2023. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see how, with modern technology and all that stuff, what can they do with bullet time now? Hopefully it doesn't look cheap and fake and whatnot, but maybe they can come out with something completely new that we can't conceive just yet. But on top of that, we also have some probably negative news for some people. Spider-Man. He's basically about to be pulled from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, the reason for this is over all these contracts and the renewals and whatnot. Apparently, when Sony got the most recent license for him, which was several films back at this point, I believe they had the contract for, I think it was 5 films. There was, what was it, Civil War, Infinity War. No, he wasn't. I forget which one is which. But anyway, including Endgame and Homecoming and Far From Home and all, I believe there was 5 films, and then that contract was up. So they had to go back with Sony and Disney to renew the entire thing. Now, I have all the details of it here. So obviously they couldn't come to an agreement and all that stuff. So naturally they were talking about just pulling him away from Sony, or pulling him away from the cinematic universe side of it, the Marvel Cinematic Universe side, and going from there. Now, so here, Sony were not happy about the whole situation, Sony Film Studios, and they went public about the deal, which is almost practically unheard of. But Sony Film Studios published some of the details about the deal, and it looks like this is all Marvel's fault. Now, so everyone is going after Sony for this, for not bending the knee and just bending over for Marvel to take their cut just so they can make their stuff. But it looks like it is all Marvel's fault. The original claim here is that Sony Pictures claim Marvel wanted a 50-50 split of all revenue. Now, Sony wanted to keep the original deal where Marvel got 5% of the first dollar gross plus all merchandise sales. I am not 100% up on how these things work, so I don't technically know what a first dollar gross is. Going to admit that. I can like formulate ideas based on the wording in my mind, but I'm not 100% sure, let alone 5% of a first dollar gross. I don't know. But anyway, that's the house of mouse when it comes down to it. But if this is all true and it plays out that they do get pulled from the cinematic universe and stuff like Venom is just going to be its own thing, and there's going to be like a separate Spider-Man universe, not so much Spider-Man universe, but separate Spider-Man stuff, well, who knows? Hopefully whatever comes next, be it the Venom stuff, or what's the next one, Absolute Carnage or whatever it is, hopefully they're not horseshit like everything else pre-Spider-Man Homecoming was. Now, someone's going to see me say that about Spider-Man 2 and not going to be very happy, but people, the best of the worst is not something good. It doesn't work that way. Have higher standards. Just because everything is bad and one is slightly less bad, it doesn't make it good. But now we're back with some quality positive news. Persona, that amazing game series, at least the mainline series, and so much other fun stuff, when it comes to their spin-offs and all as well, Sega and Atlus have officially hit a large sales goal milestone. Now, many people are going to hear this number and they're going to try to criticize it, but you'll see why now in a minute. So they've officially announced that the Persona series, which includes every mainline Persona game as well as every single spin-off Persona game, obviously it doesn't include the main Shin Megami Tensei series, the Devil Summoner series, the Overclock, no, that's the same one, the Digital Devil Saga series, all the other stuff. It doesn't include those. It only specifically includes the Persona games and the Persona spin-offs. Persona Dancing, Persona Q2, Persona Q Arena, stuff like that. Now, it took 10 million units of sales. It hit the 10 million unit mark ever since 1996, 23 years ago. That is a long time for not just one game, but a long time for a series to hit a 10 million sales goal. Because nowadays you have games that sell 10 million. You have games that sell 50, even I was going to say 15 million, but 50 came out. You have games that sell that kind of stuff. Red Dead Redemption 2 is like at what, 30 something million at this point. GTA 5 has over 100 million sales. So that's pretty crazy in that regard as a comparison. But Persona and its spin-offs are extremely niche games. Now, Persona 5 did wonders for that. It brought it to a mainstream audience. It made the entire series it brought it into a whole new light. It's a whole new popularity. Many, many more people see it and are exposed to it nowadays. And just as a comparison, think of it, 10 million sales in 23 years. Persona 5 alone, which released in 2016 in Japan and 2017 in the rest of the world, a modern masterpiece by the way, it did 2.7 million of those sales alone. So over a quarter of those 10 million sales are in the last 2 or 3 years from Persona 5 alone. And of course that's going to go even higher when Persona 5 Royal comes out. But it goes to show, quality over quantity. Persona 4, how should we do it? Persona 3 is where I started on Persona. I got a little bit into it on Persona 3 Portable, and I got a couple of hours in. Hell, it might even be like 10, 15 hours or whatever. Really enjoying it all at the time, but for whatever reason it was, I stopped. I'd wanted to play Persona 4 Golden or Persona 4 for years. Then they released Persona 4 Golden with the Vita, so I picked up a Vita specifically to buy that game. Of course, originally the game was supposed to be out 6 months after the Vita. Then it was delayed in Europe, and yeah, so it took like a year before I could play it. But anyway, Persona 4 Golden was just absolutely amazing, and it became one of the best games I've ever played. And then, of course, Persona 5 did the same thing several years later. So it really goes to show it's quality over quantity. Even if you have one game every 5 years or whatever it is, the quality and the reception, everything speaks for itself in that regard. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool, and like I said, it includes all the spin-offs, the fighting games, the raiding games, the dancing, blah blah, dungeon crawlers, all that stuff. I can't wait. Persona 6 is going to have the absolutely monumental task of trying to top Persona 5. I don't know if it can do it, but I really, really hope it can, because that would be some top tier stuff. Hell, who knows? Maybe you could even, Persona 5 was so good, maybe Persona 6 could even threaten my greatest game of all time. Secret of Mana. Imagine that. Imagine hearing those words out of me, that Persona 6 is my favorite game of all time. Imagine that. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I know I'm fucking psyched for it. But onto some Metro related news, and this is probably good stuff, unlike, well, the majority of Metro stuff you've heard over, well, all of 2019 at this point, with the Epic Game Store and whatnot too. But anyway, Metro 2033 has now got a new film in production. There was already an existing film canned essentially way back in December of 2018, but this time the Russian film company Gazprom Media, I'm sure someone's going to correct me about how I butchered pronouncing that, is now in charge, and they're at the helm, and they're working on the whole situation. Now, filming starts next year in 2020, and it will launch in 2022 with a Russian premiere. No cast, director, producer, anything has been named or involved just yet outside of Gazprom Media as the company with in charge of all of this and dealing with the whole situation. But it already sounds like it's going to be better off, and probably just even in better hands and a better film than the one that they were working on last year, the American MCM version that they canned. You know, the one where they tried to Americanize it, they tried to change the whole reasons and all the what was going on. They tried to set it in Washington instead of Russia. That sounds bad, but hopefully this one sounds better. So far it sounds better. Hopefully the people involved and everything will do it more justice. And well, 2022, 2023, Depends on how long it takes to get ported outside of Russia and translated or whatever it is, subtitled or dubbed or who knows. Hopefully it's good. First 2 games were great. First game in particular was fantastic. Back onto more GOG stuff and more exclusive stuff. No, I'm not going to shit all over them for 2.0 at this point in their launcher for launchers. But GOG have come out and they've talked about statements and talked about their history and whatnot too. And they said that clearly PC store exclusives don't work, which is likely true in most regards. But I will say this, as much as I want to just twist this and twist these words and twist this perspective and all just to my benefit to shit on Epic Games, well, the announcements and the details of this one are a bit more skewed. The data and the perspective and everything involved is a little bit more skewed. It's still partially true, and what they say is true in relation to what they're talking about. But yeah, as much as I want to blindly jump and just use this and say, fuck you Epic Games, haha, that ain't me, fam. That ain't me. Anyway, they're talking in this case about GOG exclusives. Now, that makes perfect sense. GOG is obviously a very niche store in comparison to some of the bigger ones like, hell, even Uplay or Origin or, of course, Steam. I don't know about the Epic Games Store. I mean, technically they have tens of millions of people because of Fortnite, but how many of them, I don't count them just because it doesn't count. You need people who buy games, people who do all that stuff. Because obviously if people are downloading GOG, it's to buy games. People are downloading Origin, it's to buy games. Notice there's plurals in there. Same with Steam. People are downloading Epic Games Store, it's probably to play Fortnite. So yeah, you see why I don't think that's exactly the same thing. But anyway, they're talking specifically about GOG exclusives like Thronebreaker. This is also especially pertinent because long time ago I theorized that what if Cyberpunk 2077 was a GOG exclusive. Now, of course, that's not the case, and they had even came out and said, no, we're not doing PC exclusives, not GOG exclusive, even though we own it. But anyway, back to the point. So, Thronebreaker, by the way, if you're not 100% sure on what it is, it's a Witcher-based kind of card and tactical style game. No, it's not Gwent. It's not Gwent. But it launched exclusively on GOG, where it promptly flopped terribly, awfully. Now, it was quickly added to Steam, and sales picked up a little bit in that regard. However, it's not a fair comparison. This is a completely random, extremely niche spin-off title that basically no one cared about. Now, if they were to say Witcher 3, on the other hand, if that had launched exclusively on GOG and flopped, I could get behind this a bit more. Same with Cyberpunk 2077. No, this is something completely different, completely niche, and is not a fair comparison. In as much as I would love to use this, it's not a fair comparison. But at the same time, there is a nugget of truth in there, because if all these exclusive games were as successful and such highly acclaimed and highly praised and sales numbers and blah 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 as they want you to believe, where are the sales numbers? Where's the transparency? Where are all the true, legit, non-vague, non-bullshit comparison sales numbers? Exactly. Now on to some disappointing hardware news for the moment. You might remember that a little while back I talked about some new, at the time upcoming, LG monitors. They were both highly focused gaming monitors, various resolutions and features and whatnot. I won't get into the details about them because only one thing matters when it comes to these ones. But they claim to be the world's first 1 milliseconds grey-to-grey response time IPS monitors. Now that's a big deal because primarily you have a choice between two monitor types. There are more, there's VA panels and all as well, but typically they're broken down into two different monitor groups. You have TN panels, which have lower contrast ratio, but have 1 millisecond response times at extremely high frame rates, or at any frame rate for that matter. So of course, the big key thing is 1 millisecond response time. And you have IPS panels, which have superior color gamut and better contrast ratio, better colors essentially, but have inferior, slower response times. Usually around 4 milliseconds are considered good ones, 4 milliseconds. And that can be a problem at anything over than 60 FPS. So at 100, 120, 144, 165, whatever it is, refresh rates, you're there with 4 milliseconds. It's not perfect. So I've always adamantly said that if you're going for high frame rates, anything above 60, TN is the way to go. Most people are just fanboys of IPS, even for the wrong reasons. But I've always also said that IPS panels, 4 millisecond IPS panels, have uses. They have legitimate reasons to buy them. But people will just automatically blindly fanboy and say, oh, IPS is superior, it's the best thing ever, blah, blah, blah. Also, the whole... I just did this test recently myself. I have 3 monitors here. VA, TN, IPS. I did this test myself recently with the whole viewing angle thing. It's a fucking joke. It's, oh, IPS is 178 degree better viewing angles. Yeah, but they're still not great. It's... not only that, but you're sitting in front of it anyway. I mean, come on, fuck off. But back to the whole point, I get a little bit distracted whenever that comes up, because blind fanboys annoy me. They disagree and... Anyway, back to the point. So I was intrigued by these monitors, these LG monitors, because they claim to be the world's first 1 millisecond gray-to-gray IPS response time. Now, the reason why I was so interested and intrigued about this is that if this was legit, if there was no problems, if there was no sacrifices or anything, and they could legitimately do IPS quality at 1 millisecond gray-to-gray response time, that's fantastic. That is a game changer. It's not as game changing as it's a large step forward, but it's not as game changing as what we should be going to in monitors and monitor technology in, say, 1 millisecond OLED 4K 144 Hertz HDR G-Sync module. That's what we should be going to, but this would be a proper quality. It would no longer be a choice between high frame rate TN, high frame rate, high quality TN, or IPS. Because that, essentially, if this would have been true and would have been accurate, IPS would have killed TN completely, with the exception of maybe price. It just would have killed it completely. It would have had the same response time. It would have had a vastly superior contrast ratio. There would have been practically no reason outside of price to buy a TN panel at that point. However, that's not the case anyway. Everything is not copacetic. These monitors, these LG monitors, have gone out for reviews, independent tests, independent reviews, and all that stuff. Long story short, without getting into the massive story and all that too, you basically have to go into 1 millisecond boost mode and sacrifice not only brightness, but you have to sacrifice, most importantly, the contrast ratio. Now, the contrast ratio suffers in such a large degree that it completely falls below TN standards and gives you worse colors and contrast ratio than, not only than a regular IPS, but than a TN panel. So you're completely sacrificing all of that. So it completely negates and completely defeats the entire purpose of being an IPS panel. Well, back to the drawing board is all I can say, until someone gets it right, or someone takes the proper plunge and proper step forward and gets us those 1 millisecond OLED 4K HDR 144 Hz G-Sync module equipped PC monitors. Burn in be damned. You're wrong about all of it, I swear to God. But moving away from gaming to our last normal topic today, I want to talk about The Walking Dead. Not the TV show, not the games, but no, I want to talk about the comics. Because I just finished reading the final volume of The Walking Dead. I said a final volume, volume 32, which covers issues up to 193. Which, basically out of nowhere, is the final issue, the final volume, the final everything. It's over. The Walking Dead is done. And I just kind of want to look back at it a little bit. Mainly because The Walking Dead, I started reading a few years ago. I mean, hell, it's 2019. I probably started reading it like 4 or 5 years ago at this point. I realize it's far, far older, and it's been going on for so long at this point. But even for me, and have jumped in so late in that regard, I still have a lot of time and a lot of stuff invested in it. And 4 or 5 years at this point, I could only get new volumes every 6 months or so. I can't buy the individual monthly issues because there's no comic book store or anything around here, and obviously there's certain limitations in that. There's a couple of them up in Dublin, but I didn't have that option for the longest time, and a lack of easy access to physical comics here was just basically it just didn't happen. But despite watching the TV show, and I started watching the TV show long before I started reading the comics, and I haven't watched a TV show in a few years at this point. I gave up on it, but I started reading the comics about halfway through watching the TV show, And there was years worth of it at that point that I could read through, and I made a good bit of it. And even though I finally stopped watching the TV show, due to how bad it had been for several seasons at that point, I still continued to read the comics. They were far, far different and far, far better in many, many ways. Now, they weren't always better. There were a couple of handful of things that the TV show did a little bit better, or some of the characters, or some of the situations, or whatnot. But the comics were just overall better. And I can't even say that. I can't even come across as one of those pretentious cunts to say, oh, the comics were better. I've been reading those for 10 years before the TV show started. Because no, I started reading the TV show. I started watching with the TV show. And then years later, I started reading the comics. So, but you can always see the difference. I didn't go in thinking, yeah, this is going to be better. Wanted to start reading it and say, oh yeah, what's the difference? And then it just turned out to be so much better. But, yeah, I just wanted to throw in a little bit about The Walking Dead. It hasn't always been the best thing ever. There have been a couple of lulls in there too. A couple of the... Now, I say a couple. There's literally maybe 2, if not 3 volumes. There's 32 main volumes altogether. And I'd say 2, maybe 3 of them have had kind of just been filler ones. Typically, something big will happen in the course of those 6 or so issues. And if worst comes to worst, at the end of it, there will be a big cliffhanger for the next one. But there have been maybe 2 or 3 volumes out there that nothing happened throughout the entire thing. Kind of like the TV show in some regards. But even at the very end of it, they didn't have a cliffhanger for what was coming next. So, like I said, it wasn't perfect, but I don't need everything to be a 100% high-flying action the entire time. I can appreciate certain different styles and certain different ways they take it. So, yeah, here's to you, Walking Dead. That's going to enjoy space on my shelf till I become one of the Walking Dead. But that's it for all the new fun stuff to talk about today. Now we're going to be on to the last little amazing bit to talk about here. We have Q, what are you doing? What are you playing? What's going on with you? Well, currently, my main focus is Yakuza Kiwami. I just started that the other day, and that's my primary one that I'm working on the entire time, or at least that I will be whenever I have a free moment. Attack on Titan Season 3, the first Blu-ray arrived, it's just sitting there behind me. I'll get around to it whenever. I do find that Attack on Titan is kind of better binged. I know when, let me give you a perfect example. When I sat down to watch the very first episode of Attack on Titan a couple of years back, I had all of Season 1, or Part 1 of Season 1, whatever they released it as. And I told myself, you know what, I'm going to watch one episode, see if it's any good, and then I can space it out and watch it as time goes by. Of course, what happens, I sit down, I watch one episode, it's holy shit, this is so good. I watch all of Disc 1 that night, and then all of Disc 2 the following night. Same thing happened just recently, a few weeks ago, when I finally got around to watching Season 2, and I said, you know what, I'm going to watch 1 or 2 episodes tonight. Lo and behold, I binged the entire first disc. Next day, I binged the entire second disc. And I'm probably going to do that again with this one. Because Attack on Titan is great, and I can't wait to see what happens in Part 1 of Season 3. And then, of course, there's Part 2 of Season 3, which is going to be coming out down the line eventually, too. Also, Batman Hush came as well. That was in the same order, so that's sitting there behind me as well. I'm going to get around to watching that one too. Other than that, Life is Strange 2, Episode 4. Luckily, these episodes are maybe about 3 hours longer, so if you see this by this on release day and all too, I'll actually be streaming Life is Strange 2, Episode 4 later tonight, and you can check that one out too. Otherwise, if you come back and want to see it much later, if you see this much later, it obviously will be up on demand on there too. Also, I'm looking forward to AEW, All Elite Wrestling. All Out is next weekend actually. I don't get to watch it live, unfortunately. I will download it and watch it the next day. That's going to be pretty good. I would watch it live if I had the chance. I did watch some of the other ones, but I don't have the ability to do this one. Hopefully it's going to be good. I know one of the high profile matches recently had to be cancelled due to Jon Moxley being put out with an injury from one of his other ones, so that is a little bit unfortunate. The replacement match isn't as high profile and it's not as heated, but All Out is promising to be good when they go, well, all out. But on top of that, a Collection of Mana physical edition will arrive for collector's purposes later this week. Obviously, I don't plan on opening it or playing it. I have it digitally on the... Why am I putting it on the Switch? The Switch is over there. Then again, I suppose I play it on that monitor. But yeah, that's on there too. Obviously, the digital version makes it much easier than worrying about anything on there too. Other than that, Blair Witch is coming out in a couple of days. I believe it's out on the 30th. I will be playing that. I'm going to be streaming it if I can. Not a 100% promise. I will be doing it if I can. I will definitely be buying it and playing it, and I will stream it if I can as well. Work dependent and everything else going on around there too. That's going to be, it could be all over the place. But until then, September is when it really starts getting busy. A couple of games out at the start of next month. Catherine Full Body is out at the start of the month. The Gears 5 is going to be coming out on pretty much the same time, within a few days of that too. There's also another game at the start of next month that I just can't remember off the top of my mind, but it really just goes to show that there's a lot coming out in September for me. Hell, even in October as well, between the Mega Drive Mini, the Capcom Home Arcade, and Luigi's Mansion, there's probably even more that I'm just completely forgetting about for it is at the moment. And then of course Pokemon in November. But that's it. We'll see how it goes. I'll give you an update every week on all of that as always, because, well, it's what we do. It's what we queue. But anyway, until then, I want to thank everyone for hanging out, shooting the shit with me, doing whatever it is, listening to all my incoherent ramblings and ranting and whatnot. And of course, leaving your feedback in the comment section below, your thoughts and opinions on any topic we talked about in this one here today. Feel free to leave a recommendation in the comment section below, or slide on in to those Twitter DMs. They are open. One of the many reasons being to hit me up with some stories if you do feel that they would be of interest and import to me. Let me know all of that on whatever media it is. I can't promise that I will include it, but of course, naturally, I will take a peek at it. Until then, let me know how I did in the comment section below. Hit the appropriate button to let me know how I did on the video, and while you're at it, why not head on over and hit the subscribe button and even ring the little notification bell so you can be one of the first people who gets that nice little notification every weekend whenever one of these episodes goes up, or a live stream, or a video, or whatever it is. I know YouTube are going to do everything in their power to fight against it, but hey, at least you can say you tried, am I right? As always, thank you so much for watching, and remember, winners don't play switchboards.